modeling and talking about different things you can do in your virtual space throughout the session. Kicking your morning off or kicking your day off with your students, your class off with music, right? So there's different ways that you can instantly create a mood or a vibe for your students as soon as they hop on Zoom with you or hop on whatever digital platform that you're using, to instantly let them know that this is a space of belonging. This is a space where, you know, you're welcome. Yes, we're going to learn, but we're also going to be having fun today as well. So just different recommendations. Thank you all so much for dropping your city, your state, your school and organization into the chat. It's great to just see who's in the room. My name is Brandy Arnold. I'm the Chief Learning Officer for Project Wayfinder. And so what that means is I oversee all of our school support. So all of our school partners from the moment that you sign on, from training and onboarding throughout the year. My team and I work with you to make sure that that experience is going well for you as you implement our curriculum with your students. And I also work internally on our with my colleagues on our own culture internally at Project Wayfinder, and how are we creating cultures of belonging? What does diversity, equity, inclusion look like for us? How are we making sure that we're walking our talk and operationalizing that as a team as well? So I'm really excited to be on with you all today. And I also want to give an opportunity for my colleague, Emily, who's going to be monitoring the chat, helping with breakout rooms. She does it all. She's fantastic. I want to kick it over to her to intro herself as well.
Hey, Brandy, thank you. My name's Emily. I am on the marketing and communications team at Wayfinder. So I'm so lucky because I get to tag along with Brandy on some different sessions and help out with Q&As and with chats and just make sure you know, if someone has questions, we give them some answers. So great to be here, and so happy to see all of you, and good morning. Well, good morning where I am. I don't know about everyone else, but it's a good morning over here.
Good afternoon, good evening. Hoping it's not the middle of the night for any folks that are on with us today, but you never know. And if that is you, thank you for your dedication. There may be some international folks that snuck in the room since we got started. But thank you all for being on with us, regardless, recognizing that so many folks who've worked with young people, whether you're a teacher or educator, or just working tangentially with young people, there has been a lot of work that we have put in, that everyone has put in collectively this past year. And as your school years are wrapping up, I know that there is fatigue, both emotional, physical, mental, all of the above. And I just want to say my hat is off to you for everything that you have done and navigated and pivoted this year in order to support your students in a, you know, completely unexpected, just has flipped our world upside down in so many different ways. So I want to just thank you all for carving out space today to be on this session. I want to thank you all for everything that you've done throughout the school year to support young people in your lives, and just kind of really make sure that we're grounding in that and name that today, because it's important. So thank you all. So just to kick us off, we're definitely going to go through a session with you all where we take you through an experience talking about our curriculum. We're going to do a lesson from our curriculum that we think really helps students think about what does it mean to belong. And we're also going to give some recommendations, tips, and tricks. But before we get started, we want to ground this in the Project Wayfinder way. And for us, as we think about creating a culture of belonging, it really means showing up as your authentic self and bringing your full self into a space. And so this isn't going to be your typical sit and get professional development opportunity. It's going to be interactive. It's going to be experiential. We're going to be talking back and forth. You're not going to have to listen to me talk at you for an hour. And so I want to kick it off with just modeling a ritual that we do in our curriculum and offer to teachers who implement our curriculum to just really help ground your students into their space, whether that be physical or digital. And so when we think about creating a culture of belonging and showing up as our authentic selves, as educators, often when we come into a professional development space, it's, hi, my name is, I teach this grade, you know, and it kind of stops there, right? And while I know that education is so important to all of you and your jobs and your roles are so important to all of you, that's not all of you, right? That's not your full self. You are multifaceted, complex human beings who have many, many sides of you. And we want to give an opportunity to kind of go beyond the name, go beyond the title, go beyond the hi, my name is, and really connect with each other in this space as we think about cultivating a culture of belonging in a digital space. What better than to practice it ourselves, right? And so we're going to take an opportunity before we really dive into the session to just connect and see who's really in the room. And so we're going to do what we call a radical introduction. And I hope that the word radical doesn't scare too many people away. It really just means thinking differently about how we show up in a space and how we connect with each other. And so we're going to break you into breakout rooms and just give you an opportunity to briefly connect with one another. Just say hello. Of course, you can say, hi, my name is, talk about where you teach or where your role is located. And then also go a bit beyond that. And we're going to give you a prompt. And so as we're thinking about belonging, I'd like us all to just get really grounded in a memory or a thought or a feeling around when we felt like we belonged. So go ahead and just think about a moment. It doesn't have to be a recent moment, but it can. But a moment where you felt like you belonged. What did it feel like? Who are you with? Where were you? What were the sights? What were the sounds? Maybe even what were the smells? Often when I think about belonging, I think about sitting down and breaking bread with other folks and having a meal and that connectivity, and you're talking and you're eating and you're just enjoying each other's company. So smells are often associated with belonging for me when I think of like amazing food. But just take a moment and start to think about a situation, an experience where you felt true belonging, where you really felt like you belonged. And I invite you to share that with the person that you're going to connect with in your breakout room. And I want to name, as we talk about belonging and we're connecting in maybe a deeper way, there's a certain vulnerability that comes with that. And I just want to honor that and say, you can go as deep or as shallow with your sharing as you'd like today. Hopefully there's a memory that you would feel comfortable sharing with someone that you just met. If you don't want to share the full story, that's okay. But hopefully there's something in your mind that you can share with other folks, but obviously don't feel obligated to share anything more than what you're comfortable sharing. And I just want to name that before we move into our breakout rooms. Does anyone have any questions for clarity? Again, this is just a really quick intro to just give each other a chance to connect in our rooms. And Emily's going to send you off into breakout rooms here. We'll give you each about 2 minutes to connect. We'll let you know when it's time for the other person to share. So make sure there's enough time. And then we'll bring it back together for our full group discussion and just reflect on what that experience was like together.
Sounds good. Okay, I'm going to break you into breakout rooms. I saw a few people saying that they maybe won't be able to participate fully. That's okay. So you may have 2 or 3 people in your breakout room. So just feel free to share. Okay, here you go.
Thank you, everyone.
People are entering.
Hello, welcome back, everyone. Thank you for hopping back with us. We have probably about 30 more seconds before the breakout rooms close all the way. So we'll give folks just a chance to jump back into the main session. Sometimes the breakout rooms, at least I know for myself, when the notification pops up, like I instantly just want to click to clear it. But just a note that when the notification pops up, it's just a warning that you have about 60 more seconds before the room closes. If you want to take that full 60 seconds, you're more than welcome. Otherwise, if you have wrapped and would like to come back to the main session, you can do that too. Welcome back, everybody.
Got about 5 seconds. So we have everybody out. Okay. People should be joining back in.
Thanks, Emily. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. We're grateful to have you back in the main session with us. Hoping, I know it was probably a fairly short conversation, but hoping that you had an opportunity to just share out a moment around when you felt like you belonged. And so I want to just kind of quickly, before we dive into the rest of our session, just give us a moment to reflect on that activity, and would love for all of you to unmute yourselves as you would like. There's also the on your screen in the menu bar, there's an option to for reactions. And so if you want to do raise hand or something like that, you're more than welcome to do that as well. But we're welcoming participation in this. Again, you don't want to hear me talk for an hour, just me. So would love to hear from folks. What came up for you in the room? You're more than welcome to talk verbally or drop it into the chat if that works better for you. But what came up for you? Were there any like shared stories? Was it a similar experience maybe? Or just as you were thinking about what came up for you, what was that experience like? Just a reflection in general about thinking about connecting in this way with folks that you're just meeting for the first time. Would love to hear from you all.
Well, our group, I'm Jessica. Our group had 3 people, and I was very impressed. We all seemed to be able to communicate pretty effectively quickly. And the takeaway that I have from our group is that we felt most comfortable with family and friends. And so we kind of even tagged that on to virtual learning, saying that we should create a climate or a culture in our rooms, virtual rooms, of family and friends, so that the kids are able to feel that sense of belonging.
I love that, Jessica. Thanks so much for sharing that. Yeah, how can we recreate that feeling in our rooms, that family feel? I'm glad that you were able to kind of brainstorm around that quickly. Oregon Trail. Thanks for sharing that in the chat, Elaine. I love that. Connectivity over shared loves or shared experiences. Yeah, I see a hand up. Kimberly, go ahead.
So our group talked about similar interests and finding things in common, and typically where we felt we belonged were with people who had similar interests or similar ideas about whether it was band activities in high school or scouting as a kid. Being able to come together and experience things with people who had similar interests was important.
Yeah, you feel like you found your people in those moments, right? Yeah, that connectivity. Thank you so much for sharing. How about one more? Anybody else like to share a reflection?
Hi, yeah, this is Jen Full Love, and I'll just share that Catherine's experience was so profound to me because she shared going from in high school from a room where the teacher was warm and welcoming and feeling a kindredship with her peers, and then walking across the hallway to this atrocious misogynistic teacher who, you know, didn't believe a female could be president someday and was constantly battling with the kids, and it just felt dysfunctional and awful. And so, but yeah, I second what you say, Jessica, about creating a family feel, especially in an online classroom when it's a little tougher to do, and just really getting to know and welcome your students and especially respect their perspectives. And that was not happening in Catherine's high school experience. So it was profound.
Thank you, Jen, for sharing that. I think that's a really great segue into just talking about the work that we do, because so much of the work that we do and the curriculum that we've created is about around helping students feel seen and heard and valued, and really creating the opportunities to connect. And we know that because of the amount of time that they spend in the classroom and in the school and with you all, that there's such a rich opportunity for you all to lead with vulnerability and to create that atmosphere where students do feel seen and heard. So I appreciate you guys all just sharing that out and diving in with us and connecting with each other. Hopefully you're feeling a little bit closer to the folks in the room already. So just to talk through our agenda, so we're going to talk through community agreements around how we'd like to kind of collectively show up for the rest of the session. We'll give you a Wayfinder overview and do an experiential lesson, and then hopefully, fingers crossed, there'll be time for additional questions at the end. We also have a resource that we would love to share with you all around a belonging check-in kit that we've created as part of our curricula. Feel free to reach out to Emily either in direct message on the chat if you'd like to learn more, and we can definitely follow up with you about some of the work that we do with the check-in kit in our curriculum. So to just quickly go through community agreements, these are also always a lovely way to create the space, create the container in your classrooms. My guess is that you have a version of these that you do in your room, or perhaps have been a part of a space where you've went through community agreements. But just for today, the ones that we'd like to uplift are to listen to each other, being present. We know that you have a lot of things to attend to throughout the day. If you're needing to multitask, we understand, but hopefully we can limit that as much as possible just to be present with each other, being kind to each other, reserving judgment, both of others and ourselves, which I think sometimes can be the most difficult. Just managing airtime. I don't foresee that being an issue with us today, but practicing step in and step back, and then leaning into discomfort. So trying on new ideas today. Maybe if you're not someone who typically shares in a space like this, maybe pushing yourself to maybe just share a little bit more than you normally would. And of course, not being afraid to ask questions. Some virtual community agreements, those are important. Just continue to stay muted if you could, unless you're unmuting yourself to speak. Sometimes that background noise can get distracting, as we all know. We appreciate any grace with any tech issues that we encounter. If you are working from home and a kiddo or a pet happens to pop up on your screen, we understand that and welcome that as well. And of course, participation is really welcomed and encouraged today too. Before we continue, I want to co-create these with you all, and I want to offer an opportunity and an invitation if other folks have additional community agreements that maybe they use in their classrooms that they'd like to drop in the chat, and make sure that we uplift those community agreements in the space today as well. So I'll give it just a moment if there's any additional ones that maybe you've used or experienced that you think would be beneficial for this group. Please go ahead and drop those in the chat for us, and we'll make sure to uplift those community agreements throughout our session. All right, so we are going to really quickly just go through an overview of who we are and what we do. At this point, you're probably like, who are these people? They're asking me to do all these things. I don't even quite understand what they offer and what they do. So we are an SEL curriculum company, and our CEO has actually described it as a human development curriculum company. And I really loved that, because I think SEL is important, but also thinking about as we're supporting students through these transitions, whether it be middle school to high school, elementary into middle, high school and beyond, all of these transitions that they're encountering, all of the complexity that they're encountering, how do we help them wrestle with those things and provide tools and support for them to wrestle with those? And that is what we do with our curricula. It's a tool to support you and supporting them in doing that. We were founded at Stanford's D School in the K-12 lab. It's really a space for educators to come together and think differently about what education could look like. And it's really exciting, the fresh, innovative ideas that come out of there. And we're definitely grateful to have been rooted in the K-12 lab and be able to benefit from the creativity and innovation that's happening there. We set out to address some of these cultural messages that students are receiving throughout their lives, especially early on when they're in middle school and high school. So often students believe, and I think a lot of us in the room have with life experience come to find out that this is not the case. But a lot of students believe that you can get into this cadence and this rhythm and that you're just checking boxes, right? That I have to get straight A's, I have to do well on the SATs, I have to get into the perfect college, right? The one college that's best for me. I have to be a part of the cool group. I have to do all of these things and check all of these boxes. And if I do all of those things, I will be successful. And we know that that's not the case. And as students learn that that's not the case, it can really throw them for a loop because there's these reinforced messages that we've received. Additionally, they believe that there's only one way to be successful often. And if a student doesn't necessarily fit that dominant image of what it means to be successful, they can start to internalize that. It affects their idea of self-image and their self-worth. And so there's a number of messages around what does it mean to be successful? What is success? Additionally, this very developmentally appropriate approach for young people, but that life is all about you, right? And so how do we help students think about their connectivity to their communities, the way that they can meaningfully contribute to the world around them, the way that they are also responsible for creating cultures of belonging? Yes, you as educators can lead in those spaces, but it's also a collective effort. And also this thinking that you have to be like everyone else and everyone has to be just like you. When really we know that even though we can often feel belonging when we're with people from who have same backgrounds, same differences, and that can feel really powerful, there's also power in cultivating belonging among groups that are different and have different lived experiences, different backgrounds. And we don't all have to be the same. You don't have to be like the cool kids, right? And they don't have to be like you. We can all show up as our authentic selves. and feel true belonging. And we know that from these dominant messages that students are hearing, and that the things that they're internalizing and the pressure that they feel, that they're struggling. So here are some things that we've heard from students as we've done research and gone out and talked to educators and students about the challenges that they're facing. I won't read them all out loud, and my assumption is that these are not new to you, that you've probably heard these from students in your school as well, or read research around this. But students are saying they don't feel like I can be authentically me. I don't know why I'm learning any of this. I don't feel connected to my peers. We know that students are struggling. And we know that the pandemic has exacerbated this, as students are, even students who are used to going to school virtually, at least outside of school, they had that connectivity in person. And even at this point, not only were they going to school virtually, but they also didn't have the opportunity to connect in person with their friends or their family, right? Maybe they didn't see grandma and grandpa for over a year. And we know students are feeling disconnected, they're feeling isolated, and they're not feeling like they belong and like they're a part of something larger. They feel alone. And so we've created a curricula that we believe is a response to this, is an anecdote to this. We know that just because there's no map to a destination, it doesn't mean that we can't help students learn skills to find their way, to feel like they belong, to feel like they can meaningfully contribute to the world around them. And we do this through our curricula, which is rooted in a wayfinding metaphor. We know for thousands of years, our ancestors did not have GPS. They did not have a map to find their way. They used the sun, they used the stars, they used the ocean waves, they used the wind, they used animal tracks. And that is the metaphor in which we're rooted, in that there's no map, but what are the points along the way? What are the tools? What are the signs along the way to help you navigate life's complexities? How do we prepare students for that, for life's complexities, and help build agency and increase the resilience? And these are a few of the design questions that we focus on. Again, focused around belonging and purpose. We do this through two lenses, belonging and purpose, through 6 years of curricula geared towards middle and high school students. I'll be talking a lot about our belonging curriculum today because of the topic at hand of our session. We really feel like it's a foundation. It's really hard for a student to think about how they want to meaningfully contribute to the world if they don't feel like they have a place within it. And so especially in that middle school time period, what are the ways that we can start to think about creating belonging and that reciprocity? But the toolkit that we'll be sharing, if y'all are interested and want to learn more, is something that can be applied across grades, elementary through high school. It's not necessarily geared specifically toward a certain grade level. The curricula is focused on inside out work. We know that really giving students an opportunity to reflect on themselves and the world around them is important. And then moving into a lens of, okay, well, how do I make an impact now that I know about myself more? What are the ways that I can contribute to a culture of belonging? We have a paper toolkit, but we also have a digital app, specifically because we know a lot of schools were virtual before a pandemic, and if not, they were definitely virtual after. So we want to make sure that schools can access our toolkit virtually as well. It's very interactive. It's a really great way to help students engage in these conversations while also making sure that we're centering human connection at the same time. And just as a note, we are CASEL aligned and working to become one of their partner providers right now. We're in the application process around SEL competencies. So we make sure that our curricula is aligned around all of these competencies that you see here, and they definitely show up in each part of our curricula. So before we dive into our experiential lesson, where we show you kind of what it looks like to talk about belonging through the Project Wayfinder lens, I want to just ground us in some of the research that shows the benefits and ramifications when students feel like they don't belong or do belong, or conversely don't belong. Again, I'm sure this isn't news to you, but when they feel like they do belong, not only do we see impact on academic achievement, but we see it on self-esteem, stress management, mental health, relationships with their peers and with you as educators. And of course, conversely, we know what it looks like when students don't feel like they belong. And I wanted to do some language setting around belonging and what that means. It's a pretty lofty term. It can have lots of different definitions. And this is the definition that Project Wayfinder operates from. And for me, this is really powerful and meaningful because often when we think about belonging, we think about fitting in, and we equate it to fitting in. But the way that Project Wayfinder talks about it, we feel like if students have to hide parts of themselves or limit parts of themselves, if they don't feel like they can be their true selves to fit in, then that's not true belonging. We really do want to get to a place where students feel comfortable to bring their full, authentic selves into a space. So for our last portion of our session together, we'd like to take you through an activity from our belonging curriculum called Identity Accordion, talking about identity development, thinking about the way that we show up in different spaces and places. How do we build trusting relationships where we can show all the different parts of our identity? And so I want to make sure I know that there's some chat messages popping up. I want to make sure there aren't any questions. And while I'm pausing to check in on that, if you don't have a pen and paper near you, even if it's scratch paper or just a page from your notebook, go ahead and grab a piece of paper. We'll just need, just a plain old piece of paper from your notebook or a scratch piece of paper for this next activity. So go ahead and grab that if you do not have that near you already. Let's see here. I'm just checking through our chat to see if there are any additional questions. Emily, it doesn't look like it. Just some feedback. Yeah. And so thank you, Cynthia, thinking about the pandemic. We know, especially boots on the ground folks like yourselves who are in with students every day, we know that these things were happening before the pandemic. And if nothing else, maybe potential silver lining is that maybe it's becoming more at the forefront and people are paying more attention and hopefully putting more resources behind supporting students with these struggles. And yes, Lauren, I too am in my 30s and still struggle with understanding what success looks like. And I tend to get down on myself because I do have this vision, or I compare myself to others, right, who are similar age than me. So we know that this doesn't stop. It continues into our adulthood, and it can be really troubling, and especially for students who are younger, who maybe don't necessarily have the skill sets yet to navigate that. So how do we support them in that way? All right, so we're going to go ahead and dive into our experiential lesson called Identity Accordion. So hopefully you have a piece of paper near you that you can rip out of your notebook if possible. We do need it freestanding. As you can see here, we're going to actually be creating a little paper accordion in real time. So get excited. I'm excited. All right, so to go ahead and get started with Identity Accordion, we are going to go ahead and make our paper. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect, but we're going to make our paper into a little accordion. So to do this, you're going to take the left side of your page and you're going to fold it under. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect. Mine never matches. You can probably see here. It's like the paper is just all uneven, but again, we're just kind of makeshift here. And then you're going to take the right side of your page and you're going to fold it over the top. So go ahead and do that. So it looks like it's in thirds, kind of a trifold, essentially. And then you're going to go ahead and open that back up. And you're going to write 1, 2, and 3 across the top of your page. So the side that you folded under will have 1, and the side that you folded over will have number 3. And then you'll go ahead and flip that over from the right-hand side. Go ahead and flip it over. And then you're going to write 4, 5, and 6 across the top of it. So it should look like the image you see on the screen here. And once you have that written down, go ahead and flip it back over so that 1, 2, 3 is up and facing you. And I'm going to take you through some prompts as you think about different aspects of your identity. Again, we'll be breaking out into breakout rooms one more time to debrief and to discuss. Just want to set a reminder that hopefully there's at least one thing on your sheet today that you wouldn't mind sharing out with your partner or potentially the full group. But if you'd like to keep these things and hold them just for yourself with some individual reflection, that's okay too. Don't feel like you have to share anything more than what feels comfortable. But as we think about our identity, we know that there are many parts of our identity. And we don't bring them all into every space, right? Or into every conversation with people. We know that there's a certain level of trust that needs to be built before we share certain parts of ourselves. And as we think about cultivating a culture of belonging in a digital space and encouraging students to bring their authentic self, it's important to ask students to reflect on, who is my authentic self? What are the different parts of my identity? And how do I show up in different spaces and places? So we're going to do that today. We're going to be doing a little bit of reflection. So I'm going to take you through a few of these prompts, and I invite you to just go ahead and reflect on your paper. So as you're thinking about the prompt for number 1, you'll see that 1, 2, and 3, you'll see that there's examples at the bottom. Again, as a reminder, this is a slide deck that our educators use with their students that we provide to them as a tool. We provide facilitation guides, slide decks, tips and tricks on implementation for them to lead their students through these activities. And so you'll see that there's examples at the bottom. If any of those resonate with you, you're more than welcome to use one of them. You'll see that they're kind of geared a little bit more toward young folks, but some of them are across age ranges. And then you'll see that there's 3 examples at the bottom. If 3 things come up in your mind for you, you can write 3 things down, but try to have at least one answer for each one of the prompts. So number 1 is, what is something that people notice or assume about you when they first meet you? For me, when I think about this and I think about my identity, and we're using the word identity broadly here. It could be your physical identity. It could be your gender, your sexual orientation, your faith, your culture, your national origin, language spoken, lived experience, all of these things that go into making you who you are. Role in your family, the title that you hold, any of that. We're using it broadly here. But when I think about number 1, I think about things that people see first, right? When I walk into a room. And so my gender, my race, so Black and woman are probably 2 things that I would put here. And just to say, I'll never ask you to do anything in an activity that I wouldn't do. So you'll hear me here sharing some examples from my own personal experience as well. Definitely something that you can do with your students too, as you're starting these conversations and having these conversations, finding a way to share about yourself that feels appropriate and relevant for you. To just lead with vulnerability. So students can see from your actions that this is a safe space to share about themselves. Number 2 is something that you only express in inner circles. So this is something that only probably immediate family, those who live with you, your close friends, that's something about your identity that maybe only those people see. And number 3 is something that people only learn about you when they get to know you better. I think for me, there's an assumption that I am an extrovert, given the work that I do trainings, I do webinars and things like this session today. But actually, once people get to know me better, they find that I'm an introvert, and they find out that I'm an introvert because I do need that time by myself to recharge. While I love talking to people, I also it takes a lot of energy for me to do things like this. So I consider myself an introvert, and that's something that's part of my identity that people may only see once they get to know me better and spend more time with me. So I'll give you all just a moment to write your answers for each one of these prompts before we move on to 4, 5, and 6. And again, as many as comes to mind for you, but hopefully you have at least one for each of these. You're probably noticing that maybe some come a little bit more quickly than others. Maybe there's a couple that you had to think about a little bit more. I just want to check in with folks. Either you can give your actual thumbs up or maybe just use a reaction. How are we doing? Does everybody have at least one for each of the prompts? I see some nodding heads. I see some thumbs up reactions popping up. Okay. Good. Okay, sounds good. We're going to move on to 4, 5, and 6. And I'll give you a chance to see all of them at the end too, in case there's one you want to go back to. But for number 4, we're going to think of parts of our identity that people that most people know about you or that you express often. So maybe this is something that people know that you talk about. It comes up a lot for you. You're passionate about it. Maybe that's that thing that they're like, oh man, like she's really excited and passionate about these types of things, right? Part of my identity, I would consider myself an advocate. I have background in racial equity work. And so that's something that inevitably comes up in conversation with me because I'm passionate about it. So that's something that I might share a lot with folks. So maybe this is a passion that you have, a talent, a skill. Number 5 is something that makes you feel different from the people around you. When I do this one, I tend to go back to my high school self. I'm from a predominantly white community and I went to a predominantly white school. And when I think of high school Brandy, if I was to complete this, I think that would be something that I would put down as my race made me feel different from most of my peers and my teachers and other folks around me. And number 6 is something that's important to you, but you don't talk about that much. There could be multiple reasons for this. It could be maybe that it just doesn't come up in conversation very often. It could be something maybe that has really shaped you, but it has also been really troubling or a struggle for you. Maybe something that you really need to trust people in order to share that part of yourself because of the feelings that come up for you around it. Could be a multitude of reasons why you wouldn't share this, but it's just something that doesn't come up in conversation with folks. For some folks, it may be they don't feel psychologically or physically safe to share that parts of themselves. So again, I'll give you a moment just to make sure there's at least one for each one of these. And I'll pull up the full, all 6 of our prompts here, just so you can see them, reflect back. Okay, just to do a check-in, how's everybody doing? Does everybody have at least one for each one of the prompts? We see thumbs up, got some thumbs up, okay. Perfect, okay. Looks like we got a solid number of people. So, all right, so now that you have answers for each one of those prompts, we're gonna kind of go back to our initial activity that we did. So my guess is that your paper is now flat. We're gonna go ahead and refold it back into our accordions. So again, you're gonna, if 1, 2, and 3 is facing you, you're gonna go ahead and fold the left-hand side down. And then you're gonna fold the right-hand side back over. We're gonna move it back into our accordion, our trifold here. And all of a sudden you see that, ta-da, you have this beautiful accordion. I'm gonna kind of play it like this because I think that's how they play accordions. At least that's what they see in the movies. You'll have this beautiful accordion that is playing music that is distinctly you. These are parts of your identity that show up in various ways, in various places and spaces. But you'll notice that as you look at your accordion, number 1 and number 4 are on the outside, whereas the other numbers are more on the inside of our accordions. Given our discussion, and you can drop this in the chat, you can unmute yourselves and share out, why are number 1 and number 4 on the outside of the accordion? Why might that be?
I know you wanted us to answer, right?
Yes, yes.
Oh,
Yep.
sorry. I think because, we talked about how, there's only parts of us that we keep to ourselves until we trust people more. I think we fear judgment, we fear, just not belonging. So these are the parts that, people can gather based on, not knowing much about you. So those the inside are things that we are, maybe scared to share.
Definitely. Thank you, Lauren, for sharing that. Yes, exactly. And I'm seeing folks sharing in the chat, kind of echoing your comments. So exactly, these are things that you either can't hide about yourself. So maybe it's your physical representation, right? The things that I mentioned as part of things that people notice about me when I first walk into a room, or they're things that you choose to keep to yourself because you need a certain level of trust to share those with folks. My guess is that if I asked everybody, if we went around and all 30 something of us shared out number 4, it would probably be a lot less, there'd be a lot less apprehension around sharing number 4 than maybe number 2, right? Obviously, there's a certain level of trust that's needed, and we're all folks in a room who don't know each other that well. And so there'd be more apprehension around that. We know that there are benefits to opening up our accordions more. As we think about creating cultures of belonging, we know that when we start to share something and it's received by someone, and not only is it received well, but I feel affirmed, and maybe I found that I have something in common because I shared that thing. I found that I have something in common with the person that I'm sharing it with, or they just support me in a way that makes me feel closer to them. We know that there are benefits to opening up our accordions more. But we also know that there are a number of consequences as well. If we open up and it's not received well, then there can definitely be consequences. And so to end our experience together, I want to just reflect on that. So we know that cultivating a culture of belonging actually kind of requires a little bit of vulnerability, a little bit more sharing, a little bit of opening up opportunities for your students to share different parts of themselves that maybe they wouldn't normally share. But we know that there's a balance to that, right? And so we're going to break you all into breakout rooms just one more time for our reflection and debrief. Emily's going to recreate the breakout rooms and send you all into different spaces. So hopefully you can connect with someone new. We can also drop these questions in the chat for you so you have access to them as you're in your breakout rooms. But I'd love, as you go into your breakout rooms, if you'd like to share something from your accordion, please feel free. Don't feel like you have to. More so thinking about, how much do you open up your accordion at work? So when we do this with our students, the student question would be, how much do you open up your accordion at school? So just giving you an opportunity to reflect on how open or closed your accordion is and what some of those reasons might be for how open or closed it is. Do you feel like you can show up authentically at work? If so, why? If not, why not? What are some of the reasons you might keep your accordion more closed? And then discussing some of the benefits and challenges or consequences to opening up our accordions. So we'll send you into your breakout rooms. We'll give you a little bit more time for this one, just because there's multiple questions here. And we'll let you know when we're getting closer to bringing you back to the main session. And while Emily is sending you all into breakout rooms, I can go ahead and put these in the chat. We have access to them.
Let me know once you put them in the chat. I will break people out.
Perfect. Thank you, Emily. And of course, let us know if you have any questions for clarity before we move into the breakout rooms as well.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to start breaking everybody up. Some people might have 2 or 3, and then we'll watch and make sure no one's in the room alone. So enjoy.
Emily, if you could wait just one moment. Once you send them into breakout rooms, they won't see what I'm dropping into the chat. So I want to make sure they have access to it.
Good point. I'm going to copy what you're saying too, and I can repost it in the broadcast as well.
Thank you. All right, so we invite you to speak from your own perspective, but also maybe wearing your participant hat, but also maybe wearing your teacher hat and reflecting on what it might be like to do an exercise like this with your students, how it might contribute to creating belonging in your digital spaces. And we'll bring you all back to do a wider group reflection before we close. We'll zoom you off.
Okay, closing them. So I'll be back in 30 seconds.
Welcome back. Welcome back. We'll give folks a few more seconds as more people start to pull back into the main session. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We'll give everybody just a few more seconds to join our main session. It sounds like they're going right up until the last second, which always feels good when folks are in their breakout rooms right up to the last second. There's good conversation happening. All right, welcome back, everyone. Hello, hello, hello. Do we have the full group back, Emily? We're good. All right, welcome back, everyone. Thanks so much for diving in again into your breakout rooms and just discussing the ways that we show up in different spaces or places and how open or closed that we might be. Before we close and kind of talk about some resources that we would love to share with you all, I'd love to just do a brief reflection on some of the questions here. And so again, we can do this popcorn style, feel free to unmute yourselves or raise your hand, but would love to know what came up for you in your breakout rooms. This could be from your own perspective about your own experience doing this lesson, or thinking about how you might have conversations like this with your students. Maybe I would love to hear how open or closed your accordions are at work, if you'd like to share that with us as well. But what came up for everybody? I'd love to hear from you.
Well, I'm Jessica, and my accordion is usually wide open and hanging like a cape from my back because I'm a little bit of an oversharer, but I share everything about myself. But when we were in our breakout room, I was kind of talking about that sometimes that's a defense mechanism because if I share some private details, sometimes people will keep moving and I know that that's not a safe person for me. So anyways, I'll shush up now, but that was my experience today.
Thank you, Jessica. No, that makes sense. I think there's a way to like weed out folks, right? Depending on what you're sharing, and especially if you kind of have built up enough resilience to navigate the ramifications potentially of that. Yeah. For sure. Yeah, that makes complete sense. I love the analogy of a cape flowing from your back. Like, this is me, I'm here.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Anybody else?
My name's Danny.
Go ahead.
My name's Danny, and I was thinking how our staff, we have a lot of new staff this year because we grew so exponentially, being a virtual school, and they don't feel connected. They would like some sort of team building activities because they don't all live near each other. We have mostly from Michigan, but we have some out of state teachers as well. So I thought this would be a really good activity to use just with them on their own teams that they work on. And then also it would be open up their eyes to how they could use this with their students and how important it would be for their students, just as it's important for them to feel that connection and do those team building activities.
I love that, Danny. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I will say, and I don't think I mentioned this, we as a staff do these activities every week. We take turns leading belonging activities as a staff, not only so we can obviously better understand our product and experience for ourselves, but we've also really felt the benefits. We are a fully remote team as well, and we've really felt the benefits of participating in these lessons. Yeah, so thank you for sharing that. I see a couple of comments in the chat as well from Elaine. Definitely want to highlight the messages around how much do we share with our students, right? Especially around, she mentioned how much of our opinion do we put and our perspective do we put into the classroom? And yeah, I do think there's definitely a responsibility to weight those things in terms of our opinions. And sometimes in lieu of kind of putting too much of our opinion, just sharing our own experiences, I think can be so helpful for students of, you know, you can just present the experience and students can kind of make of it what they will. And obviously finding a way that's appropriate and relevant. You know, I know that there's a definite wanting to maintain certain level of boundaries and not, you know, share too much of yourself with your students. But I think that's definitely something to consider too, as to how do we present a balanced perspective. And then a follow-up comment around depending on the group, right? So group meetings, we might tend to close our accordions up a little bit more than we would maybe in one-on-one conversations or things like that, especially if we're someone, Elaine, you mentioned your diversity, and I'd love to invite you to share some more context if you'd like, but I don't want to put words into my mouth, but if you are someone of a diverse background or potentially a marginalized community, the consequences can be potentially even greater to open up and share different parts of yourself, depending on the spaces and places that you're in. And I also want to highlight that and make sure that we're naming that for the group as well. So thank you for sharing that, Elaine. Thank you for sharing that, Cynthia, around stigma when we share different parts of ourselves. And so Cynthia, it sounds like for your students, maybe there's less stigma, it's more of a common understanding, whereas for adults maybe find it harder to navigate that and then the response to around ADD. Yeah, so stigma is definitely something to be thinking about as we share different parts of ourselves. Thank you for sharing that, Cynthia. If I may, I'd love to just kind of read this quote here. They seem to see my vulnerability, whereas adults do not. That really hits me. I felt that. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for being vulnerable with us today. I appreciate you just lifting that up for the group. Belonging is about vulnerability and sharing different parts of ourselves and then being affirmed and celebrated, right? I want to go back to that definition that Project Wayfinder operates from. But we know that there's consequences. And so when we do these lessons and when we encourage educators to do these lessons, we say, have a counselor present. If your counselor is in your school and available to you, have a counselor present for these conversations. Let the counselor know that you're having these conversations and make sure that they're available if a student needs to follow up. Always naming that students only have to share what they feel comfortable sharing and nothing more, giving them voice and choice in how they participate. All of these things to make sure that when you're creating the container from these conversations, you're taking care of yourselves and your students. So I want to quickly just go through a resource that we'd love to share with you all before we close. And I'm hoping to at least save 5 minutes for questions too. So I'm going to move through this a little quickly. Emily has dropped her email in the chat a couple different times. So please follow up with her if you'd like to talk more about these resources and access them to use in your school and your students. With your students. So the the identity accordion is typically set up to be done in about 30 minutes. We did a little bit of a condensed version today. And so if you have 30 minutes in an advisory, or if you meet with your students on a free period, those are activities that can be done in a little bit more of a longer period of time and can be done virtually, as you've seen. If you have less time, the belonging check-in is for you. So these are just small little activities that you can do. They typically only take 5 to 10 minutes. And these are ways to just, if your students are coming in for algebra, what's a belonging check-in you can do before you dive in? If they're coming in for civics or English language arts, what is something that you can do with your students to just kind of create that atmosphere in your virtual space before you even dive into academics? So we'd love to share this kit with you. If you're interested, please reach out to Emily. These are our welcome rituals, which you saw, the one that we did when we first came in, experiences, personal exchanges, and closing rituals, which we'll do as we leave today. So I'm going to touch quickly on experiences because we kind of already walked through welcome rituals. But these are activities that you can do with your students to create focus, boost energy, and build community. Things like a virtual scavenger hunt, again, you can make these go as long or as short as you'd like, maybe just, the first 5 to 10 minutes of your class. Personal exchanges are, again, ways to just kind of open up the space for students to reflect about themselves and creating belonging with each other. And it's all about sharing and listening. So we started with community agreements. We highly recommend co-creating those with your students and having them frame your time together. Throughout the year, check in on those agreements and ask the students to reflect on them. How are they showing up? Are they staying true to the agreements that they created? What's a way that they might want to show up differently? Just kind of reflecting as a group, sharing with a partner. And finally, our closing rituals are ways, as you open up the space, you want to close out the space as well. So these are really brief activities that you can do to have students reflect on their experience, synthesize what they've learned, what they feel, and just think about what are the takeaways that they've received from this experience. So we have a kit that includes 3 different examples for each of these headings. So a couple examples of welcome rituals, including the one we did today, a couple of examples of experiences, personal exchanges, and closing rituals that you can use with your students. That kind of walks you through how to do those that we'd love to share with you. In addition to the activity that we did today, the lesson that we did today. So we'd love to be able to share that with you as well, including the facilitation guide on how to lead that with your students. So I'd love to leave this last 5 minutes for questions that you might have before I want to make sure that we close out with our closing ritual as well. So just would love to open it up for any questions folks have about how to create these spaces in your classrooms. You can drop them in the chat or feel free to unmute yourselves. I'd love to hear your voices. And I thank everybody who has participated today, sharing parts of yourselves with us. Yeah, scavenger hunts, right? They're fun. They just build energy, right? You're just kind of like looking around your room or your house, trying to find an object really quickly that you can grab. They're a really great way to just get silly with it, break up some of the monotony. Thanks for chiming in, Rachel. I appreciate it. Any other questions that folks might have? I'm choosing to take this as a sign that I did so well giving the overview that I've just answered all of your questions and you're ready to dive right in with your students. Oh, thank you, Mia and Lauren. Yes, thank you, Elaine. Asking students to share their family's experiences of eras we study. Sure, depending on your students' backgrounds. Thank you, Elaine, for participating. Depending on your students' background, certain eras of history are hard to think about, right? Depending on what their ancestors and folks who came before them encountered. I know when I was a student, every time we talked about the civil rights movement or slavery, right? And everybody would turn to look at me and, was your grandma a slave? Like I got questions like that, right? From my peers. And so we definitely would recommend sites like Teaching Tolerance that bring up different ways to examine historical eras and think about reframing them. How do we see the struggles that folks went through? I'm going to use the Black experience because that is my experience as an example. How do we bring up those struggles? But how do we also examine like really amazing people in Black history who have invented things or started things, or we just honored the Tulsa massacre, right? And so there was this whole community in Tulsa, Oklahoma who had, it was essentially called Black Wall Street, right? Black-owned businesses, people were thriving, right? There's these really amazing parts of our history as well that we can also uplift as we talk about the struggles. that people face, so that students aren't necessarily always seeing themselves as, you know, a people who struggled or people who were marginalized, or, you know, also celebrating the achievements as well. So yeah, just thinking about how do we frame things in our classrooms for students so that they can feel seen and validated and celebrated and heard, uplifting their cultures and all of those things through your curriculum, through, you know, asking people to share something from their culture, right? Bringing something that is important to them and sharing out about it and why it's important. All different ways that we can celebrate. And to that note, Emily, I'm adding things that we're going to share out with folks should they reach out with us. We wrote a couple articles about cultural competency in the classroom, identity development, how to make students feel seen and heard in your classroom. We'd love to share those articles with you as well, in addition to the belonging check-in kit and the identity accordion activity. So really important for Project Wayfinder. We talk a lot about it. We really work with our educators around offering PD around this. So we'd love to continue the conversation with you all. So please, please, please reach out. We'd love to talk to you. We'd love to hear what you're doing in your classrooms. We're always learning from boots on the ground folks like yourselves who are working with students every day. We can't do what we do without you. So thank you so much for being here with us today. To close out, again, I just want to express my gratitude for everything that you do for your students, especially this year. Thank you for hopping on with us today. Thank you for sharing space. Thank you for showing up as your authentic selves and sharing with each other. Thank you for connecting. Would love to invite you all as our closing ritual to just drop in the chat. Spark, stretch, or struggle. If you'd like to drop a struggle, if that's resonating for you, you're more than welcome. However, I will probably focus more on spark and stretch today. What is something new that you learned today? What's something that sparked for you? Maybe a new idea that you're thinking about for your classroom? Or what's a way that maybe you stretched yourself today? What's a way that you pushed yourself and showed up maybe a little differently than you normally would? I'd love to hear from you all. That's kind of your exit ticket. So please go ahead and drop those in the chat. We'd love to hear from you all about how this experience was for you. And please feel free to reach out to Emily. Otherwise, thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your day. Have a great rest of your time at the conference. We're really grateful for sharing space with you today. So thank you.